And I think with that idea of making offerings, it's in many Buddhist, actually in all different kinds of Buddhist texts, there are descriptions, right, of that generosity and offering. Actually, in any Buddhist culture, right, you'll see people, right, like there be offerings on an altar, right? Doesn't matter which Buddhist culture it is. But I think it can seem a little, sometimes for us, there's a danger of it seeming a little, I don't know what the word is, formal. So anyway, let's do what Shantideva advises. But what I want to suggest is this: is we're going to do it the way, kind of a modified version, but kind of close to what Shantideva is doing. So what I want to suggest here, he says the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. But what I want to ask you to do is pick somebody, an enlightened being, and particularly if you can think of one who's alive, that'll make it easier, maybe. So think it could be the Dalai Lama or any of your teachers, or if there's not somebody like that, then you can think of the Buddha, it's fine, or Tara or Avalokiteshvara or whatever. But try to make it realistic is my point. So like for myself, say I'll use the Dalai Lama. And because part of what we're getting at here is a sense of closeness, of offering and with a sense of closeness, right? So the imagery Shantideva is using, right, is some of it is quite beautiful. So what you're going to imagine is that you invited that being over, right, and you rented a place, Airbnb, but you rented a really nice one, right? It has flower gardens, and you bought uh, planted flowers and fresh cut flowers, right? And this is an enlightened being you invited over, so you even like how people do, like where they take off they have flowers all around, but you also take off and sprinkle the petals on the floor, right? And so imagine you're there alone, right? And this enlightened being is coming. You invited them and you know they're on their way, right? And you're putting out, and actually, so what food would you put out, right? Imagine putting out the nicest foods. You prepare drinks, non-alcoholic, obviously. It's the Buddha or Buddha. Um, and you set up, actually, you can even imagine the seat you'd set up, right? You think, oh, wow, this enlightened being coming over to my place, so you go to the store and you buy a seat, right? What kind of pillow or blanket or whatever, covering. And then, as they arrive, actually, so Lynn, or was it Jan? Somebody was just talking about the monks, right? So it's like that. They're arriving, but now it's you personally, right? And it's that momentous, right? It should feel momentous. And this is actually in every sadhana, many sadhanas, many practices. We do this in a ritualized way, but you're supposed to actually imagine it for real, right? You're supposed to really imagine. So you imagine you open the door and there's this enlightened being. And do you offer them flowers or a scarf, kata? They come inside. Mm. You can imagine like offering them something to drink. And now we'll get more, actually, this is traditional, Shantideva's suggestion. So you actually imagine that you take off their shoes and you have like warm water, scented water to soak their feet in and rub their feet to help them relax and feel welcome. Can you imagine that? And you've lit incense. So this is like so there's flowers all around, the scent of flowers mixing with the scent of incense in the room, and then the scented water, you're rubbing their feet, like that's quite a relaxing thing to offer. Mm. Because you want them to feel welcome after a journey. Mm. And just take a few moments to imagine, right? Offering them the water, some whatever else to drink. You can imagine the nicest drinks, the nicest foods, right? A variety of foods that you might offer them. And this is getting at an emotional experience. So what I suggest is imagine, as Shantideva says, imagine offering them jewels, right? But try to imagine, like, I don't know what the word is, the experience of that, the intimacy of that, right? Of handing that person a diamond, a ruby, or sapphire, and then another, numerous ones, right? And you can see on their face, it's not that they care for rubies or sapphires or diamonds, but they accept it out of love for you. Even if they then put it aside, right? There's a sense of an exchange of devotion, an exchange of love. The same with the washing their feet. Right? It's like they accept it out of love for you because they know it makes you feel a sense of closeness to them and to the enlightenment that they've achieved, that you have the potential to achieve. This must be just one more step. So imagine as they're sitting there relaxing on this very comfortable seat you've set up for them with flowers around, that after you've rubbed their feet, you dry their feet with a nice cloth. And in the same way, you rub their shoulders after their journey. And how does it feel that sense of this closeness, like you're their attendant, you're their heart student, their close student, their but in Buddhism, that close student's like family. Actually, the relationship of student and teacher in Buddhism is not like professor or high school or junior high school teacher. A teacher-student relationship of this type that Shantideva is getting at is like it's like you become family, closest family of that Buddha. In some ways, closer than family, actually, because it's a relationship will go from life to life. Mhm. And if there's anything that you particularly value that brings you pleasure or joy or happiness, actually, at least imagine one thing, right? So think of at least one thing that personally brings you happiness or joy. Well, it could be an object or an experience, something that you like, but you like one of your favorite things. It could be a food or it could be an experience or music, kind of music, whatever. And imagine sharing that with them, offering it to them, right? Like, this brings me joy, may it bring you joy. And imagine they feel joy at receiving it, knowing that you love it. You love that thing and you love them. And then as you're there, right, in this space with them, in this beautiful place with them, just conclude this by thinking this, like looking at them and thinking, they have achieved the result of the path, enlightenment. Uh, the Buddha and all these enlightened beings always say we all have that potential. So now I'm going to complete the path. I'm going to traverse that path just as they have done. Whether it takes a short time or a long time, it doesn't matter. But that's my task. They've done that. They're here to help me, and I'm committing to following that same kind of path to achieve full enlightenment, just as they've done. And with that feeling and thought in mind, I'll do once slowly the verse of refuge and bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, to the merits of generosity and the other perfections. May I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And I was going to say, do you get the sense like that was a very shortened version, actually? Like, if you go back over Shantideva, you'll see it's much more elaborate. And actually, if you do right, if you read like the King of Prayers or the Lama Chopa, the Guru Puja, or Medicine Buddha Puja, many, many different practices, thousands of them actually, but they're much more elaborate than what I just did. And the idea is that, you don't just like, I just want to say that because Shantideva's text is one of them, and there are many others, but the idea is not that you just read the text and go, oh, wow, he's offering, jeweled lamps. Oh, he's offering wish granting trees or something, right? Like the idea is like, so that, let's say a wish granting tree, right? You can go, oh, wow, in the mandala offering, you offer the wish, is one of the things on the list, right? A wish granting tree. But you actually imagine, right? Like, I don't know, my example today was the Dalai Lama. So I imagine that like I go to Dharamsala and I plant one, right? And then every day he can sit under it and I show it to him. And I say, this is my offering to you. And may you use, wish granting trees, grant whatever you want. May you use it to benefit the Tibetan people and whatever you want, and yourself and all beings. And see, I mean, my point is that these things that Shantideva is writing and that other texts have, if you want to engage in those practices, this is what you do. And it's almost like a virtual reality interaction, right, with the Buddhas. Uh, is what Shantideva was getting at, right? That's what he was doing. And that's what you do, if you want to do those practices, right? You imagine being there. There are seven offerings on this altar at the center always, right? There are seven water bowls. right? And it can just seem like, oh, you're just pouring water, right? But that's what they symbolize, actually. They symbolize, you know, in ancient India, if you offered, I'm sorry, if you invited someone very like a great spiritual being or a king or a queen or whoever to your home, you would offer seven things: flowers, incense, water for drinking, water for washing, food, what we just went over, lights. You would offer them to that person because you would think that's traditional offering, which actually isn't so different, right? If you invite some of them, we leave out, but usually wash the feet. That's an Indian tradition, but beautiful one. Actually, it's also right. It was in the Middle East too. It's not an American tradition too much, but the rest we do, right? If you invite somebody to your house, you usually offer them something to drink and something to eat and so on. Anyway, so the point here is that when you put those seven water bowls out, it's not just pouring water, is that you imagine, you know, you invited somebody home, right? You cleaned up, you made your house nice, you invited them there, and then you're offering them things. And it's a sense of closeness and intimacy and generosity and love that you're cultivating. So anyway, I just did a very brief version just to give a tiny flavor, but you would do a much more elaborate one if you like. And that's part of the practice. And do you get the feeling also of how that's connected to the Bodhisattva vow, right? Shantideva is building up to taking the Bodhisattva vow. And so this making offerings is part of creating the atmosphere for vowing to become a Buddha yourself. um, and then I think we left off. We're still continuing on with these seven practices, seven limbs, actually, they call it the seven limbs, um, that are preparing, that are practices that you do to prepare to take the Bodhisattva vow. And you also do them daily, actually. They're daily practices. So we left off on verse 26 with refuge and bodhicitta, right? Where he says, until the essence of enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddhas. Likewise, I go for refuge to the Dharma and to the assembly of bodhisattvas, the Mahayana Sangha. And I talked about refuge last time, so I won't go into it again. So we'll pick up with the next verse, 27 of chapter 2, which is, I'll read the two verses together and I'll explain. And this is a long the rest of the chapter is this section. So he says, with folded hands, right? That traditional Buddhist gesture. I make requests to the complete Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who possess great compassion and reside in all the directions. Again, do you get this? By the way, do you get the sense here, right? One is, you make this gesture, right? And by the way, in Buddhism, you put your thumbs inside traditionally. So it symbolizes like a wish granting jewel. And the wish granting jewel, like Avalokiteshvara holds, is bodhicitta, right? So it's your own compassion. You hold it at your heart. It's your aspiration. I wish to achieve that. And it's also, but the fingers inside symbolize bodhicitta, actually. Um, and you're imagining Buddhas and Bodhisattvas residing in every direction, which they do, so you imagine Buddhas and Bodhisattvas all around. And then you say, since beginningless cyclic existence, since beginningless samsara, that's me, right? I've been in samsara forever, since beginning. There's no beginning to my samsara. In this life and in others. So in this life and in my previous lives, unknowingly or out of ignorance, right? I have committed negativities and caused them to be done. So we're starting with a general, this is what they're calling it in the chapter here, confession. Or, so it's acknowledging our flaws, our faults, right? And then it's going to be a long section here. So this next long section they're calling it a confession or, acknowledging one's faults. And you're doing it, so if you're invoking the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and then you're going to confess your faults. So I wanted to say a few things about that because it could seem, I don't know, I'm not sure how people relate to that, confessing your faults. But for those I want to say a few general points that actually are connected to commentaries. One is, do you remember when we studied the previous set of classes, many of you were in it, was the 37 harmonies with enlightenment. And in those 37 harmonies, there are sets of harmonies, right? There are the first four are the four foundations of mindfulness, which are right where you become mindful of your body, mindful of your feelings, and so on. Right? And in those 37 harmonies of enlightenment, each set of practices led to the next. I said that during those classes. And so one point is, if you practiced mindfulness, right, you become aware, This is like of the Four Noble Truths. Right? That those four foundations of mindfulness are practices that help you become aware of the Four Noble Truths. So you become aware of the nature of suffering, the cause of suffering, that it's possible to end that cause and that there's a path to destroy the cause of suffering and thereby end suffering, right? And if you practice the four foundations of mindfulness, you become more and more viscerally aware of that, not as some intellectualized teaching, not as some moral somebody telling you what to do, but as an experiential, oh, this is actually what's causing my suffering, right? I'm causing my own suffering through hatred, through greed, through jealousy, through arrogance, through whatever, that I cause my mind agitation. I cause myself to do things that cause me and others to suffer over and over and over. And when you do that practice of the four foundations of mindfulness, they lead to what are called the four supreme strivings, the next set of in the 37 harmonies with enlightenment. And this is like the core spiritual practice of this is actually all Buddhist traditions agree on this. Doesn't matter which Buddhist tradition, they all teach this. And part of the four supreme strivings are when you understand experientially that mental afflictions and the actions, your own mental afflictions, right? Your greed, your craving, your agitation, your annoyance destroys your peace of mind and makes you do things that further destroy your peace of mind, then you want to stop doing that, right? And so you start to strive. You have an aspiration then. You feel, I don't want to be that way anymore. I can change. My mind can change, and I want to change it. That's my striving. That's my effort. So if I have some negativities, I want to overcome them and break those habits. And if I don't have them yet, certainly don't want to start them, right? If you say, well, I'm not addicted to, I'm not an addict, but I don't want to start addicting. I don't want to murder anybody. Let me not start that. Like you don't want to start new negativities, then you want to get rid of the ones you have, right? And then you want to start to develop positive qualities, right? And to enhance the ones you have. Those are the four supreme strivings. And those are actually, there's no practice without those, is there? Right? That is our Dharma practice. And that continues from beginning level all the way up to Buddhahood until you become a Buddha. You have to practice that, right? Even high bodhisattvas are overcoming subtle obstacles. So my point here is the reason why did I go over that? One is those four supreme strivings are part of purification, right? The practice of in the commentary I said that the commentaries on the 37 harms of enlightenment point that out that those four supreme strivings are part of how you purify your mind, right? And purification here, do you get the idea of it? Like, whereas purification is not some like magical like thing. The Buddha said, I can't wash away your faults with water or by touching your head, right? Or whatever. I can't do some. And the Buddha said, I can teach you the path, right? That's what the Buddha said, I can teach you a path to purification, and then you have to practice it. And that's the way you become purified. So you'll see in Shantideva's text here, that's what he's doing, right? So when we say confession, I don't know, sometimes when I first heard that, I don't know, I wasn't raised in that tradition, but I remember having like hearing from I had some friends who were like who practiced Catholicism, and there were some very good Catholics, but these friends were saying, like, oh, I did this and then I confessed, but then I did it again. Then, so I confess every few weeks and then I'm okay or something. This is not like that, right? This isn't confessing to somebody so that they can tell you something that then you're fine. Confession here is acknowledging your faults in a certain way that helps you change. That's my point. And maybe for some people, Catholics, that's also confession. So I'm not criticizing that tradition, but I was just when I first read it, I thought of friends who weren't doing it right. I think they told me that stuff, but here the idea is it's not that like the idea here is how do you change? If you're going to change something, you have to acknowledge it, right? You have to acknowledge that you have a flaw. And in the commentaries, they say before going over this next section to cover the four powers of purification. So because this Shantideva follows that structure of what's called the four powers of purification, which come from sutras. And Shantideva does it quite beautifully and viscerally. You'll see this is not some when we read Shantideva's words, you're going to see this is not some like what's the word distant ritual. It's a very visceral experience that he's going to describe, a very embodied experience of especially regret. And so in the teachings, the four powers of purification are how do you do this, right? How do you do it psychologically and emotionally? And there are different orders they present them in, but I'm going to present them in the order the commentary does, which is the first one is regret. And I sometimes call it intelligent regret. And what does that mean, right? And you'll see it in Shantideva's text. But what Shantideva is getting at, what the Buddha is getting at, is no. If you know, we're getting at how do you stop your negative habits, your negative patterns of mind and behavior. And probably part of the point here is, well, you're not going to stop something if you think it's good or if you feel like it's good, right? Why in the world would you do that? That would be kind of silly. And so regret here means you generate an understanding of why would I want to stop this? What are the problems with it? And that goes back to, and if you don't feel regret, then you're not purifying, right? Like in other words, then you're not actually going to you could say, oh, I confess all the negative things I've ever done in this and future and this and all my past lives. But that's just words, right? If you're not feeling it, it doesn't actually have it. If you're not feeling regret, then it actually doesn't serve much function, really. Then it's just empty words. So really here, and you'll see Shantideva describe it, but what you do actually is you contemplate through mindfulness, right? That's why I covered the four foundations of mindfulness. You go back to mindfulness and you analyze what have I done that caused suffering to myself and others? What do I do now and mostly it's yourself, actually, in purification. It's easy to think of others, like, for some of us, but this actually is getting at how do I destroy my own peace of mind and my own inner happiness, joy, bliss? What do I do that stops me? Buddhism is saying your potential, your natural capacity, your natural state, if you let yourself sort of cultivate it, uh, is a capacity for infinite joy, infinite peace, infinite bliss. So what am I doing that ruins that? Does that make sense? And if you're not feeling infinite bliss, you're doing something that blocks you, right? I am. We're all doing something that blocks us. So here you contemplate, well, what am I doing that's actually getting in my own way? What am I doing that's harming myself? And there are different ways to contemplate that. You can look at the nature of the mental afflictions. You can also look at karma, right? And there are different kinds of results of karma. So you can analyze like there's what's called the ripen result. There's the result similar to the cause. There's the environmental result, and there's the result where you tend to do the thing again, right? Those are the four kinds of karmic results. And those actually, again, those are fairly straightforward. Like I'm going to give we could think of that in terms of lifetime after lifetime, which you can, and it's good. But I'm going to give a very simple example of that. If you shout at people and curse at them, right? That's harsh speech. That's one of the 10 non-virtues, right? Um, Part of the right result of that is people are going to shout at you. That's not too mysterious, actually, right? If you shout at people and curse at them, you're going to start to experience people shouting and cursing at you, right? You're going to have an environmental result like that, right? You're going to live in a place where people don't treat each other too respectfully. For example, your house, right? Where like your house will become that place. Your coworkers will become those people, right? Because you treat them that way, and then every time you go to work, you're going to say, "Wow, people are jerks at my work," but it's because you're creating the karma, right? So I'm getting it. You can see what I'm getting at, and what Buddhism is saying is that happens in this life, and it happens from life to life, right? Um, and then the more you do the thing, the last one of the four results, right? One another of the results is the more you do the thing, the more you tend to do the thing, which is actually true, isn't it? It's really hard to stop doing things that you get in the habit of doing. no matter how stupid they are. Have you ever noticed that? Like it could be the stupidest thing, but if you do it all the time, it's really hard to stop. Um, so you start to watch that process and go, oh, I'm creating my own problems. I'm creating my own drama. I'm creating my own lack of peace. I'm creating my own suffering. And if you notice the way you're doing that, you start to regret it. Does that make sense? And you contemplate the faults of it until you really feel a regret for it. And that's the beginning of, you see how it comes from mindfulness? That's why I went back to the 37 harmonies with enlightenment. You have to be mindful of your own experience and of watching the process in order to then go, oh, I'm doing that, right? Or like desire, right? That's a more subtle one. The fighting is sort of is somewhat simpler, straightforward. But desire, right? So you have to watch your own process. Okay, I'm engaging in craving. And what does that do to my mind? And actually, if you're if at first, actually, if you tend to crave for something, I can say from experience, the first thing I say is, no, that's no problem. It's okay. I'm good with craving, And then you just have to slow down and be mindful, right? And you watch the process and you go, oh, wait a second. Why aren't I at peace? Why is my mind not blissful? Because I want something I don't have. And then what happens when I get it, right? And then you watch the process when you get what you want. And you watch it over and over and you start to go, oh my God, this isn't worth it. It's not working for me, right? Craving is not a process that makes happiness. You have to check for yourself, right? Until you actually generate an experience of intelligent regret, experiential regret. And then you say, I want to change that, right? I want to purify that. So whatever the thing is, right? Could be harsh speech, could be craving, it could be, any of the negative actions. Um, and anyways, it's just goes so the most important of the four powers is intelligent regret. Then you engage in an antidote, uh, which is actually in the four supreme strivings. That's I'm going to cultivate a new positive habit, right? I'm going to do something positive. I'm going to enhance a positive thing to take the place of that negative habit. And actually, it's like that in life, isn't it? If you want to give up a negative habit, you have to create a new habit of something positive. And so again, this process of purification, sometimes people do like we can do it, right? You can do like in Buddhism, actually, there's things where people can do like 100,000 practices that you recite a certain mantra, which is good. You can recite a mantra 100,000 times, or you can do 100,000 prostrations. That often happens. Tibetans do that a lot. But actually, if you're not doing it in this way, actually, I had a friend who said that to me. He said, "Oh, I did 100,000 of this. I'm not sure it did any good at all." Um, which was kind of sad. He was my friend. He was being very honest. He said, I did 100,000. I spent like months doing it. I'm not sure it did any good because I don't think I was actually doing it in a way that led to change. And I was like so respectful of his honesty. He was like, he really thought about it. And he said, "No, maybe I should do them again." And he said, no, I don't want to do that. But you have to figure out a way to change, his point. Like, because it has to be a psychologically meaningful process or an experientially meaningful process, a process of actually transforming yourself. Um, and so, and Gyaltsab in his commentary gives different examples. He says, "Oh, for the antidote, you can recite sutras. You can meditate on meditation on emptiness is said to be the best antidote because emptiness is the nature of reality, and not understanding emptiness, which is dependent arising. Emptiness and dependent arising are synonyms, right? And emptiness means empty of independent existence, right? So dependent arising is the meaning of emptiness, and so if you understand emptiness, you won't do negative things because you understand the nature of how things arise and fall away, right? And anyway, so you won't do negative action. So meditating on emptiness is said to be the supreme antidote. But meditating on love and compassion is another antidote, right? Bodhicitta. Um, or you can, recite the names of Buddhas. But even like reciting the names of Buddhas, again, if you just do it like to say, oh, I'm reciting the names of Buddhas, that's not, and that's fine, it's good. But Lama Zopa once said, it's better to keep doing, if all you can manage is to pretend to practice Dharma, then keep doing that. That's better than nothing. So it's not a bad thing. But really, if you're reciting names of Buddhas, if you're doing it with this kind of, with the experience of regret, it's actually an experience, right? That you see, oh, the Buddha, or this Buddha overcame that kind of habit. I love that, you know, thing, that achievement. May I be like you, may I also succeed. You're invoking that Buddha. You're thinking of that Buddha saying, help me. I want to do what you did. I want to follow the path you followed to overcome my negative, my anger, my hatred, my whatever. Anyway, so you get the point. Um, so you can do whichever, but any virtuous action can be an antidote. That's the second of the four, right? So the first is regret, intelligent regret. The second one is an antidote. Third one is, in this order, is restraint in the future, right? So it means like you're not really purifying if you then think, you know, like if I joked my friend had done, like, but if you then think, well, now I'm going to go do it again, then you didn't generate actual regret, right? Um, there was real regret means like, I'm going to really work at this. I'm going to change. I'm not going to keep doing that pattern, even if it's hard. Um, and then in this order, the last one is refuge in bodhicitta, right? So you take refuge in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, which means that's where I'm heading, right? Through this process. And then bodhicitta is, why am I heading there? To benefit all beings, right? So it's actually very important, right? Why are you purifying? Is that's the process to become a Buddha. So anyway, so these next section are going through those four powers in Shantideva's own way. And what the commentary points out, various commentaries point out, is that if you're going to purify, you have to include all four, right? So each time you do a process of purification, the most important is to meditate mindfully until you generate an experience of regret, but then you go through those other steps. So here, I'm going to go back when he says, with folded hands, I request the complete Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, right? Already there's refuge there, isn't there? I mean, there'll be more refuge later, but he's taking refuge in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And he said, and why is he taking refuge in them? Because they possess compassion, great compassion, right? They have compassion for him, and will help him. And they reside in all directions. So he says, now he's saying a general confession. Since beginningless time or cyclic existence, in this life, my previous lives, out of my own ignorance, I committed negativities and caused them to be done. And there are two ways of create. He's pointing out there are two ways to create negativities. One is doing it yourself, right? Like, for example, stealing, or I mean, there are all kinds of endless lists of negativities that you could do, or causing them to be done is actually, in some ways, if you think about compassion, then it's really horrifying, isn't it? And we do that all the time, don't we? Like, it's like you could say, well, you're not hiring a hitman, maybe, yeah, hopefully. But actually, we do that all the time. Where like, if you're mad at somebody and you get somebody else mad at the other person to give them a hard time, right? If you like say, oh, this person's a jerk and they did that and they did this, and subtly, you're getting this person not to like them, right? Of course you are. If you're saying, oh, so and so did this bad thing and that bad thing, you're saying it to your friend, you're getting your friend to not like that person, so then they'll treat them badly. Well, that's that. You're causing something, you're causing somebody else. They're going to then treat that person disrespectfully. So you cause negativity. You cause somebody to do something negative to somebody else. And that's making the world a more harsh, right? You can see it actually. I mean, think about it, right? That's a form of suffering. You're suffering. We could think, oh, that's making me feel better. I'm venting. We say that, right? But actually, what are you doing, right? While you're talking about it, you're miserable, totally miserable, right? You're saying, oh, this person did this and they did that and they did it. Your mind is not happy. Then what's the mind of the other person? Well, they're getting agitated now, right? So now you're both agitated. So neither of you's happy. And then you habituate yourself to thinking of this other person badly. So next time you see that person, you're going to feel agitated also. But now also somebody else, when they see that person, is going to be agitated. Then when that other person notices, oh, so-and-so's friend now seems agitated when they see me, what a jerk. They're talking behind my back, right? And then they get mad at you and you continue the process, right? And then you think, why are they mad? Why do they act this way? Well, you're talking behind their back. Of course they're not, they're not going to, you think, oh, why are they not treating me so respectfully and kindly? But you're talking behind their back. So of course they're not going to. So it's your own karma, right? And if you contemplate like that, you think, oh my gosh, why in the world would I do that? Like, I'm just creating misery for myself and others by venting over and over about somebody, And I'm just giving an example, right? So I'm getting at this thing, cause them to be done. That could be something very extreme, like, but there are many subtle ways in which we cause negativities to be done, right? Um, Meaningless talk, right? You can like engage people in stuff where they waste their whole life, and you can be part of that. So anyway, then he says, overwhelmed by the mistakes of ignorance, I rejoiced in what was committed. But now, seeing these mistakes from my heart, I confess them to the protectors. So you see what he's getting at here? Actually, a few things. One is he's saying he's pointing out a truth, right? Which I and this, again, it's why I covered the four foundations of mindfulness leading to this practice. Ignorance here means you don't understand karma. You don't understand your own mind, right? Which we all are like that sometimes. So why do we do negative things? We think we want to be happy, but but we actually are creating the cause of suffering, right? So ignorance is the root of the mental afflictions, which is the root of bad karma, right? So why did I do all these negative? You're thinking to myself, why did I do all these things? I didn't understand. Right? And so do you get the point here? I want to make another point here. So I hope you get the point. This is not attacking yourself. This is not self-pity. This is not guilt. This is just saying, I was ignorant and I did something wrong. Now I want to be wise and do something right. Does that make sense? Like it's not like beating up on yourself. And so you're saying, I didn't even understand, so I rejoiced in what was committed. And actually, this is so true. At one point, it's getting at is that rejoicing in an action makes it more powerful. If you rejoice in a good action, it makes it more powerful. But if you rejoice in a bad action, it also makes it more powerful. And actually, we do that all the time, right? We rejoice in the wrong things, don't we? Like, um, so like, and that's like, people do that, right? You rejoice and like, you do like, oh gosh, if anyway, there are countless examples, right? But like, if you get away with, like, if you cheat on something, you get away with it. Oh, that's awesome, right? That's rejoicing in negativity, right? And it makes you more likely to do more of it, right? Or if you like succeed in hurting somebody you're really mad at, then you feel happy, satisfied about it. That's another example, right? You make somebody feel bad because you don't like them. Anyway, there are countless examples. So he says here, but now seeing these mistakes, right? So this is the point. It's not some guilt. It's not dwelling in misery. It's saying, I want to see my mistakes and confess them to the protectors in order to change, right? So, and um, and so here actually, you can literally go to your teacher and confess. That's fine. But here, partly think about it, right, from an emotional perspective. Oftentimes, you're just imagining the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of you, right? And you're confessing. Why are you confessing to them and not just to yourself? Part of it is you're creating a psychological context for yourself, right? Whereas the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, what the word is, I mean, you're invoking them, but actually, I don't know. I think it's sometimes a little funny. We do that a lot. There's a lot of in Buddhism invoking. Shantideva just did it, right? With hands folded, I'm invoking you. Um, Actually, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are already there, right? Whereas the Buddhas particularly are already there. They're omniscient. The idea is you're creating an atmosphere for yourself, right? Of I want to heal, I want to change. So you're thinking of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and you're saying to them, I want to change. But it's mainly you have to acknowledge it to yourself. The Buddhas already know your flaws. It's not, you're not surprising them. It's you're trying to acknowledge it for yourself and their presence so that you can change. Then he says, whatever harmful acts of body, speech, and mind I have done by means of the afflictions. So you see what I'm getting at there? I said that earlier. All our negativities are driven by mental afflictions, right? And we do them with our body, our speech, our mind. Um, so you have to, if you want to practice like this, you have to understand for yourself, right? Oh, I generate a mental affliction, right? Whatever that may, there are lists of them. You can study them. You can also figure them out in your own mind. They're not hard to figure out. And then based on that mental affliction, your you do something with your body. I gave you an example earlier, screaming at somebody, but actually it could just be a change of your face, right? You give, you do something that, whatever, you know, uh, you imply something or whatever. Anyway, or you do all kinds of things with our body. Our speech is our verbal, right? And then mind is what you think about. But so out of those mental afflictions, you do those actions, right? And then you say towards who? And now so he says, well, one point is that's how we do negativity. So you look at those. You look at your own body, you look at your own speech, and you look at your own mind, getting back to the four foundations of mindfulness, right? And you watch, what am I doing that causes suffering? That's what I want to change. And then he says, he gives examples here. He says, towards the three jewels, my parents, my spiritual masters, and others. So others includes everybody, right? But why does he list the three jewels, parents, and spiritual masters? He's pointing out that in the teachings on karma, if you study karma in Lamrim or other contexts, there are certain uh, things that make karma powerful. And one of them is doing an action towards somebody who's been kind to you. So like your parents who gave you this body. And even if your parents weren't perfect, they say doing it, if you uh, do a negative karmic action towards your parents, it's a heavier karma than doing it towards a stranger. Still negative either way, but or towards the three jewels or towards your teacher, right? If somebody was your like lama and then you harm them, that's worse than harming a stranger because they were kind to you in the past. So anyway, and then he goes on, all the terrible negativities done by me, a wrongdoer, who have created the faults of a multitude of misdeeds, I admit to the guides. Right. So again, out of our mental afflictions, I have been a wrongdoer. And one point here is you're not inherently a wrongdoer, right? You're temporarily, adventitiously a wrongdoer because of ignorance. Because of your ignorance, you create mental afflictions. By the way, ignorance here is not an excuse. Does that make sense? Ignorance is it's a prescription. It's like I want to point that out. Ignorance and mental afflictions are not excuses, but they are like, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, if you say to the doctor, I'm having a pain in my gut, and then the doctor says, oh, I don't know, you have kidney stones or something, right? Um, the kidney stones are what you need to get rid of, and then the pain will go away, right? Here, the ignorance and the mental afflictions are the cause of your wrongdoing, right? So they're not excuses, but they're causes actually that need to be eliminated. And when you eliminate them, you'll eliminate the result. So that's it. So, and that's why you're admitting them, is you want to get rid of them. And now Shantideva takes a turn in verse 32, so I want to explain for a second. Shantideva knows people, knows us, knows himself, I guess, before he became a saint, whatever. And so he's going to do something psychologically here, which gets at an obstacle to purification. And we're all like this, actually, at times. I know I've been. Where if you start to acknowledge your negativities, there's going to come a part of you that's going to say, well, I'll fix that later. For now, let me go to what I usually do, right? But later on, I'm going to really change that because that's important. So definitely I'll do that later on. But today, today's not the day, right? Today I'm not going to, or not right now. I did 5 minutes I did a little bit of my session of meditation, but now I need to go uh, fill in the blank. You can fill in your own blank, right? And Shantideva knows that that's what people do, right? And so he knows at this point, as you're trying to confess your negativities, you're going to say, yeah, okay, that was good. I confessed a little bit. Now let me go. I tried to purify a tiny bit. Now let me go do my normal daily routine, right? And he says, so what does he say? I may die before my negativities have been purified. So he's saying that to himself, but he's pointing out we need to say that to ourselves. So in other words, when you say, I may do that later, well, there may not be a later. So he says, please protect me in such a way as will swiftly and surely free me from them. So he's saying, if I want to procrastinate, I should remind myself I may not live long enough to get around to it then. Right? And then he says, the untrustworthy Lord of Death. And if you've seen like in monasteries, I have one here in my house, but there's a traditional picture, right, of the Lord of Death with fangs. And he's anyway, it's an image of like samsara is inside his fangs, and there it's an image. Actually, you see it if you go to it's a Buddhist monastery. Oftentimes, that image is the image from the time of the Buddha of the 12 links of dependent origination. And if you're walking into a monastery, you'll see it there, and it's a visible, rather, visual reminder of what Shantideva is getting at. It's the traditional image in Buddhism, which is you, I, we live in the mouth of the Lord of Death, in the sense that we don't know how long we'll live, right? So the untrustworthy Lord of Death, without waiting, uh, so the Lord of Death doesn't wait to see if you've done everything you wanted to do, right? The Lord of Death doesn't care. It's a metaphor, right? Or it's true though, isn't it? Death doesn't, that death doesn't care if you finished your project. Death doesn't care if you told people you love them. Death doesn't care if you changed your karma. Death doesn't care if you uh, only a quarter way through your practice of purification. Um, and he says, whether one is sick or otherwise, suddenly death comes. Don't be complacent about life. And this is such a Buddhist point, isn't it? But he's making a number of points here, right? One is, I mean, you've noticed that, right? Whether you're sick or not sick, right? Sometimes we think, oh, the sick person's going to die, but then the sick person's still alive, and the person who's well, died in a car accident on their way to see the sick person. That happens all the time, right? There are many examples where you don't have to be sick to die, is the point. Um, and death comes suddenly. And he's saying, don't be complacent about life. So what is he getting at? He's saying, if this is the practice that leads to happiness and peace, do it now, right? And he's not being, do you get the idea here? I hope you do, that Buddhism isn't being mean in pointing out. First of all, it's true. For one, there are 2 points. One is, it's true. In other words, you're going to die, and you don't know when. But the second point that Buddhism and Shantideva is making is what matters. And it's funny here, what really, this is purification for you. Mainly who benefits from purification is you, right? You're getting rid of your mental causes of suffering. You're creating causes of happiness. And so what he's saying is, actually, it's actually funny, isn't it? Like, we want to wait to do that. And what Shantideva is saying is, you know, do what makes you really peaceful, really happy now. Don't wait. And getting rid of your ignorance and mental afflictions is what will make you happy. So do it now, because you're not promised tomorrow or the next day. And then he goes on, leaving all behind, I must depart alone, right? Meaning when we die, right? Through not having understood this, I committed various kinds of negativities for the sake of my friends and foes. So I want to say a couple things here from the commentary. But one of them is this. So he's saying, what's that saying? You're born alone and you die alone. Anyway, we certainly go on into death alone, right? That's true. And then one of the commentaries pointed out, when you die, what do you leave behind? It was one commentary. I thought it was kind of funny. He said, "What do you leave behind?" He said, "Well, your parent, your family, whether that's parents or siblings or children or cousins or aunts or uncles or whatever, you leave them all behind. Also your friends, also your coworkers, also your acquaintances, also your food, any food that's left in your house, you leave it behind. Also your wealth, also your clothing, also this planet, also your country, your identity, also your flesh, your blood, and your bones. Not one of those, and he made a list, this one commentator made a list, he said, not one of those goes with you when you die. And what Shantideva now gets into is, so why is Shantideva pointing that out? He's saying, and yet, I, that's what we say, I do negative things for those. And he says, and he's pointing something out, he's saying, it's weird, isn't it? Because from a worldly perspective, it seems totally normal, right? Like, that's what people do, right? Like, I defend my friend. I beat up my enemy. Like if I want to harm my enemy to protect my friend. I like this person, I don't like that person, so I'm going to do something to harm this person to protect that person. Right? Or I want to have, somebody's trying to take my stuff or decrease my stuff, so I don't like them. And whatever I can do to harm them so I can keep my things and not have somebody decrease my thing. And he's saying, he's pointing something out, which is actually weird if you think about it, which is because if you just talk to a normal person, right, like that's what they'll talk about, isn't it? Like, that's normal behavior in the human realm. And Shantideva knows that. Then he's saying, if you step back, what a strange idea, right? Because like you're going to fight this person to protect that person, but both are themselves going to die. And um, and they may die tomorrow. They may die today. And your stuff. Like you'll have to fight to, we say that, like I'll fight to defend my home. But then actually it's not really your home, like not permanently anyway. I'll fight to defend my country. It's not your country permanently. Um, so Shantideva's, he's saying something very radical here, isn't he? He's saying that out of identifying these things as mine, we do all kinds of negativities, right? My friend, my enemy, my body, my house, my country. What do you say? Like, oh, I have the right to shoot somebody if they invade my house or something, right? Um, anyway, my point is like he's pointing out that we identify those things as mine, and out of a sense of mine, we do negativities. Then he says, I think it's a beautiful verse. He says, even my foes will become nothing. My friends will also become nothing. I too will become nothing. Likewise, all will become nothing. And so it's very strange, isn't it? Like what he's saying there. And I guess like can you I just want to pause there just this first of all, obviously he's getting at attachment and aversion, right? And then attachment and aversion come from viewing things as inherently mine, inherently not mine. And what is it called? Self and other, or my group and other, like we other people, right? We say this is mine, these are my people and those are the other. This is my stuff and those are not, those are the, and we do that with, whether it's based on nationality or, and we do it, people do it based on anything, doesn't matter what, right? National identity, gender, race, whatever. I mean, there's countless ways people do that, right? Actually, in psychology, right, they did those things where if you assign people randomly to groups, like it's so funny, right? If you assign people randomly to groups and then you set things up the right way, they'll come to hate each other. And then you could like stop this exercise and reassign everybody and then set things up the right way, and again they'll hate each other. And and they've done that to prove now they wouldn't allow those psychological research. They wouldn't approve that now, the board of, but they used to do those things. And then they did the prison study at Stanford where they assigned the people to be like the guards, and they were trying to understand how the Nazis had done what they did. And they saw that some psychologists, so they assigned people, you're the guards and they were all just students, Stanford students, but they said, you're the guards and you're the prisoners. And then like after a short while, the people labeled guards started abusing the people who were labeled prisoners. They started treating them abusively. They were just fellow students. They hadn't done anything. It was just a random labeling. My point is like we make, any label you give, you start to, this is like ignorant. This is why I'm getting at the ignorance thing. We created a label, then we believe in our own label, right? And somebody told us that's the label, but we are the one who believes in it. And then we do all kinds of negativities. We all are like that. That's my point. And he's saying, that's totally normal human behavior, and it's completely insane. It's so stupid, is what Shantideva was pointing out. He says, you'll be nothing. Your enemy will be nothing. Your friend will be nothing. Your enemy is going to die. Later on, he says, if you're killing your enemy, he says, if you're fighting against your enemy, they're a future corpse to start with. Like you're fighting against somebody who's going to die. They're going to die anyway. Why are you fighting them? And we know that on some level, right? Because like, you've seen that so many times, though, where like people like, oh God, they do the thing where they like somebody's dying and then they want to go confess, they want to go like make up, right? They were dying from the beginning, and then they say, oh, I didn't get there in time, or I did get there in time. Oh, thank goodness I got there in time, and we could we could prepare. You say, oh, I forgive you. Like that's because you didn't understand from the beginning what Shantideva is saying, right? So like forgive everybody now, right, is what Shantideva is getting at. Stop fighting with whoever now. They're going to die before you know it, and you may never get there anyway, so better to do it today and give up anger, give up resentment, give up whatever, all that. And attachment too, right? Because it's out of attachment we do all kinds of negative things too. Like, so he's not saying don't be kind to your friend, don't love people, but he's saying when you identify friend as mine, right? This is my friend. Actually, then we do it. That doesn't happen all the time. Oh, this is my friend. Then the person's behavior changes a tiny bit, and then we get really mad at them. Why'd they do that? They're not loyal to me. Because we identified as my, or that's not love, actually. That's like some kind of grasping, right? Attachment. This is my friend, so they're supposed to act this way. right? And he's saying, you're going to be nothing, they're going to be nothing. Don't have friends like that. Don't be that kind of friend, right? Anyway, you get the point here. So then he says a very profound another verse. Just like an experience in a dream, whatever things I enjoy will become a memory. Whatever has passed will not be seen. So do you see what he's getting at here? Why do we like he's getting at we do so like actually do you first of all do you get the experience like if you had a dream and you wake up, right? It may have been like an upsetting dream or a happy dream, but there's nothing left. You can't find anything of it, right? There's nothing left. You could have like a very powerful dream, a very meaningful dream, very whatever, emotional dream. And when you wake up, like if you had a child, they use a traditional example is if you had a child and in a dream you have a child and then the child dies and you feel overwhelming sadness. And then you wake up and you realize like, oh, I never had that child, right? Like, so nobody died. It was just a dream, right? We say, oh, it was just, actually, that's what you say to somebody if they had a nightmare. You say, it was just a dream. You're okay, right? And have you noticed that? Like, go back. Have you ever gone that? Like, go back someplace you used to be. And like, actually, it's kind of funny, isn't it? You say, oh, I used to live in this house. And I lived on this. I remember, oh, last year I went with Shay. I went to show, I showed Shayla the block I grew up on. And, oh, this is the block. And I was like, and then you look around, you go, who cares? Like, there's not a single, like, there's no trace of anything, right? I remember I looked and I said, oh, wow, there was a kid. Somebody here one day, like, I was a little kid. I grew up there. I was a little, and I was like, oh, somebody, I think it was one of these houses. He like started a fight with me and we had a fist fight. I was a little kid and he came up to me and he started, I was like, I can't remember which house it was. I don't remember his name and he doesn't live there. I was like, there's nothing. But my point is like, whatever it is, right? You went to school somewhere. So go back there. If you go back and you say that, oh, I went to school here, students say, oh, great. Who the hell is that person? Leave me alone, like it's like a dream. Nobody cares. Nothing's left of any of it. But we don't see that in the moment. Does that make sense? You get it? Like, and we do all kinds of negative. And I'm going to share a story actually that gets at this point because we don't see it in the moment. So I'm just going to get it. I remember once I was with Gyume Khyentse Rinpoche together and there was a problem at the time. There was a big problem at the time. So Gyume Khyentse Rinpoche is one of my teachers. And his visa, like, so he was in the United States together with a group of people, right? They all come together, and their visas were under threat. There was a problem, and there were people fighting. There was a big argument between groups of people. I wasn't in the argument, I don't think, but and so of course some of the people who were with Khyentse Rinpoche were like very upset because they thought I'm going to be deported. Like they were building a life here. They weren't yet. Now they're citizens. They weren't yet. All of them were citizens now, but they weren't citizens then. So they thought somebody else is fighting with somebody else. And now because of their disagreement, I might get deported. So they were very upset. And they were arguing with each other about what to do. These two Tibetans were arguing. The one said we should do this, and the other said they should do that. And they were naturally frightened, right? They were afraid for their well-being. So that got their nervous systems activated. They were arguing. And I was there and I was listening to them argue, and they were quite upset. And they went to Khyentse Rinpoche to see who was right. They wanted to argue. They went like, well, he'll know. We trust. They both trusted Khyentse Rinpoche. We'll go to Khyentse Rinpoche. We trust him. And they each were like, so they each came up in very upset. Now, Khyentse Rinpoche's, what I was very aware of is that Khyentse Rinpoche's status in this country was just as under threat as theirs were, right? That's the important part of this example I'm giving for the dream. They weren't seeing that experience as dreamlike, right? They were feeling threatened. And they went to him and they said, I say this. And the other one said, I said that. And they said, I'm right, I'm right. And I looked at Khyentse Rinpoche and he just, all of a sudden, he just burst out laughing and he literally fell down. He was like sitting on a bed, and we were in a hotel. And he fell over. He was laughing so hard. And he just couldn't stop laughing hysterically. And he couldn't speak. He was trying, like when you're laughing so hard and you're trying to talk, but you can't talk because you can't get a word out because you're laughing so hard. It was like that. And they both were staying there kind of dumbfounded, of course, because they thought that was an odd reaction. And then when he could finally speak, he said, you're both wrong. And then he started laughing again and he fell over again laughing. So when he could finally say anything, he said, you're both wrong. And then he fell back over laughing hysterically. And I was watching that and I was like, oh wow, like he sees it as a dream, dreamlike, right? There's what Shantideva is getting at here, even though his ability to stay in this country is just as under threat as theirs, he sees it as like a dream now. You get what I'm getting at? And now, if I went to those two friends, like those two Tibetans, and said, "Oh, remember, like whatever it was, 15 years ago when da da da," they would say, "Oh, wow, it's like a dream. It's gone." But at the time, of course, it didn't feel that way. He saw it in that. You got what I'm getting at? He was able to see it that way, even while and that's what Shantideva is getting at here, right? My, I, and mine. We do. Why were those two people were wonder? Those two Tibetans who I know are wonderful human beings. They're amazing people, beautiful people, but they had that sense of I and mine, right? That led to negative action, arguing, right, fighting with somebody. Shantideva saying, it's all like a dream. Later, this you look back and you think, why did I argue with this person? Whereas they were just scared also, right? And they were scared because they were labeling it, this is my life, and I was scared because I was labeling it, this is my life, and we both got agitated, and then we started fighting with each other, which created negative karma, right? It created lack of peace in my own mind and in the other person. Ken Rinpoche didn't do that, is my point. So the point here is Shantideva is saying this is how we do negativity. We grasp at things as existing more permanently, more solidly than they do. And our nervous systems, our minds, our bodies, our speech get agitated, and we do all kinds of things. And he's saying, um, first of all, it's all out of ignorance, not understanding how things exist. And then we create suffering for ourselves mostly, and then others. So you see how he's getting at regret? And it's easy to think, oh, I don't do that much negative. But, that's why I give this example of these wonderful human beings. We're all like, I'm like them. It's like, if I feel like I'm under threat, I'll do something. I'll get mad at somebody. I'll get agitated. I'll get whatever. And Shantideva is saying, that's going back to the four supreme strivings. That's what we're trying to change, right? And we all do that to varying degrees, but we need to change that or we're not going to have peace in our own minds. We're not going to have compassion. We're not going to have love. We're not going to practice. So, um, and then he says, even within this brief life, many friends and foes have passed away, right? So those I like and those I don't like die. If you look around, you can see that. And he says, but whatever terrible negativities I committed for them remain before me. You see what he's getting at there? Like, and anyway, so it's where the center near DC. I just want to give it an example. It's a DC example for a second. Like, um, if you think back to the past, right? Like, I'm going to use example. I'm going to use example of somebody who's dead. So I'm going to go to, oh gosh. I mean, there are countless examples, but like, okay. I mean, at the time when Nixon was alive, people were like, oh my gosh, people were watching the news every second. That people were like, will he resign? What will happen? The Washington Post was coming out with like the story, and he's dead, right? Most of the people who are involved with him are dead. And historically, those events had repercussions. But you see what I'm getting? I mean, you see what I'm getting? Like, or like the people who led up to the Civil War, right? Like, I mean, the various politicians, the various leaders, right? What's left? And what he's getting at here is what they're all dead, right? What's left is the karma, right? What's left is the results of your actions, right? And whether they're good or bad. So it's not saying nothing exists. I want to point something out. Shantideva is not saying nothing exists. Things do exist, right? But things don't exist the way we think they do. We grasp at them as though as though they're permanent, and we think the wrong way, actually, right? We think that through aggression or through attachment or through defending my friends and fighting my enemies, I'll get what I want. And we destroy our own peace and destroy others' peace. He's saying if you see that that everyone's going to die, that all that's left, that past experiences will soon be like a dream, nothing findable. then you can become more and more like in my story, Khenpo Rinpoche, right? Who you don't fight with anybody. I mean, and I want to point out, Khenpo Rinpoche didn't, he became a citizen. He still did the things to do. It wasn't like he didn't think nothing exists. He knew there was nothing worth fighting over, that fighting with somebody wasn't going to help, right? That aggression wasn't going to help. That, I don't know, you get the point. Um, and I want to make one more point here about friends and foes, right? Because you get the point. Yeah, I hope you get the point, but I just want to make sure, because he'll say it more clearly later. But Shantideva is not saying don't have any friends and don't love people, right? Um, for Shantideva, I think everybody was his friend. That's what the Dalai Lama says, right? He says, wherever I go, everybody's my friend. That's a different thing. That's fine. You know, what Shantideva is here is saying the kind of friendship where you either will, what's the word, will hate somebody else because they don't like your friend. That's not friendship. According to Shant, that's the kind of friendship that's worth getting rid of, right? And there's another kind of friendship that's worth getting rid of, which I already mentioned, which is like the kind of friendship where you're like a prison guard, right? Or is this person's my friend, so they have to do what I want them to do? Then your friendship to that person is like, whereas, you know, so I mean, so that's not about, because those aren't love. Actually, those are like stored attachment with expectations. And so Shanti Davis, when he says friends, he's saying don't be like that. Because your friend, actually, if you think, oh, my friend's always going to make me happy, so I need them to be like this, well, he's saying they're going to die. Let go of that. Treat them with love and respect. But actually, it's kind of funny. Don't have too many expectations of your friend because they may die tomorrow. So, like, if you build up some big expectation, it's kind of silly, isn't it? Because nothing's certain in samsara. Anyway, so he says, thereby, through not having realized that I will suddenly vanish, I committed many negativities through ignorance, attachment, and hatred. And so anyway, you get what he's doing. So, and you get how he's getting at the experience of regret here. I just hope you're getting that feeling, right? That there is, he's not. This is not. Do you see how Shantideva is doing it? He's not just saying some like ritualized sort of recitation. He's really thinking deeply through mindfulness of his own experience. What do I do? And he's saying like, I don't understand. And actually, just on this verse 38, I to be honest, I do this often. If you're try it now though. If you try to think about something you were upset about this week, or are currently upset about, or know is an ongoing upset, and then think, because he says suddenly vanished, right? Think, if you think about, imagine that you know for certain you're going to die next Wednesday at noon. Right? Imagine that's an absolute certainty you're going to die next Wednesday at noon. And now look back at the thing that's upsetting you, um, and that you're agitated about. And notice how your attitude changes. And what Shanti Davis is suggesting is each time you get upset about something, that actually remember next Wednesday is actually more certainty than you have. Right? Like there's actually, you don't know that you'll make it to Wednesday, but I just made that up. Um, and he's saying we don't realize this, so we develop attachment, ignorance, and hatred. And then, so do you see the feeling of regret? And actually, I hope you get the feeling now that why you regret it is like you can see I'm ruining my own peace of mind. I'm ruining my own happiness. That's why I regret it, right? It's not some moralistic thing. The Buddha said I shouldn't do that. That's not the point Shantideva is making, right? The Shantideva isn't here and saying the Buddha told you not to do that, so stop it. The Buddha is saying, I'm not seeing that, and look at myself, right? I'm all upset about this thing, and I'm creating misery for myself. Why am I doing that? Then I'll die miserable? Like, what's the point of that? Let me change. Right? So he says, remaining neither day or night, my life is always slipping by and never lengthening. Why will death not come to one like me? And there it's getting at a feeling. I mean, he's describing a truth, but it's a feel like, and like if for example, if somebody poured a bunch of water into your hands, right, it would pour out. Or in the commentary, they give an example of if you have like a pond and then somebody cuts off the stream that feeds it, uh, the pond's going to dry out. And they say there's no stream flowing into your lifespan. Every second, your lifespan is decreasing. What's the time that's left? And so he's getting at like for himself, he's saying, um, I don't want to waste another second on stupidity, on drama, on negativity, on ignorance. Um, and I'm just going to keep going because I'll just keep going through his text. So he says, now he gets into uh, a kind of very, he's trying to, and again, I mean, this is Shantideva's own reflection, but he's getting at something, I said earlier, a very visceral, very embodied sense. So he says, while I'm lying in bed, surrounded by my friends and relatives, the feeling of life being severed will be experienced by me alone. Right? And here he's getting at it. I mean, this is a visualization, right? He's describing something, but you're supposed to visualize this yourself, right? So you think about it, right? You think, okay, this is going to be me. There's no doubt, right? Unless, I mean, may not be in a bed, maybe somewhere else, but one way or another, uh, I'm going to know I'm dying. And he says, and when I know that, even if there are friends and relatives there, um, they can't do anything actually, right? Or is you say, oh, this is my friend, they can help me, but actually they can't help you with that problem. Only you can help, and Buddhism is saying you can help yourself, but by practicing the path to overcome birth and death, but nobody else can do that for you. So you imagine laying there in bed knowing you're going to die. And then he says, when seized by Yama's the Lord of Death. And so Yama's a traditional Indian name for the Lord of Death. So when seized by Yama's messengers, when seized by the messengers of death, right? The messengers of death mean, actually, oftentimes, what's the messenger of death? For many people, it'll be your doctor telling you, I'm sorry to tell you this, but, right? I remember it was a couple of years ago, I was talking to a friend who had gotten this diagnosis. They said he had a few weeks left. He called me up. Actually, he called me up. We had not wanted contact. He'd sort of stopped talking to me some years earlier. They called me up because he wanted to apologize for that because he was dying. And he said, and I remember him saying, he said, well, there's a slight chance I could live for another like 6 months or a year. That would be so great. But the doctor said probably a few weeks. Right, so that's being seized by the messengers of the Lord of Death, right? And then it says, what benefit will friends and relatives afford? My merit alone shall protect me then, but upon that I have never relied. And and it's true actually, right? In other words, we think, we rely on our friends and relatives, not on our inner practice. And in Buddhism, they say those who didn't practice die with regret and fear. And then I said mediocre practitioners die with a sense of equanimity, and people who have practiced Dharma very well die joyfully, like somebody getting to go home. So it's a measure of practice. And I've seen lamas like that actually who died with great sense of like joy and love. Um, so anyway, it says, protectors, I, so unconscientious, unaware of such terror as this, perform many negativities for the sake of this impermanent life. And I don't know. Yeah, I'll say something where it says for the sake of this impermanent life. And I want to just point something out here. For the sake of this life. I used to find this very confusing sometimes. Lama Zopa used to say, to even begin to practice Dharma, you have to give up on this life. And I kind of thought, at the time, to be honest, I didn't know what he meant. I thought, well, what does he mean by that? Give up on this life? Like, I still have to eat, I still have to sleep, I still have to take a shower. Like, What do I was, to be honest, I was a little stupid. I just didn't understand. I was like, well, what is he? I don't get it. Like, how do you give up on this life? Like, I still have to pay my bill. If I say I gave up on this life and I can't stop paying my electric bill, like, because the electricity won't work. So I was confused. I'm just sharing my own confession. I was confused. But then he said something else years later. I mean, he taught it many times, and finally I heard something. He said, the person who's given up on this life uh, immediately experiences so much peace. And then I started to understand what he meant. Um, because what this is getting at is it's not about not paying your electric bill or not taking a shower or not eating lunch. Monks eat lunch, nuns eat lunch also. What it's getting at is what Shantideva is getting at here. What he was getting at is like knowing that, that it's like sorry to say it right. Recently, actually, it's funny, I go through different phases with this, but like, oh, I don't even know how to say it the right way. Actually, I'll share another story about Cancer Rinpoche, before we stop. One day I work as a psychologist, and this is when he first moved to the US. He was like asking me about my work, and I was describing it to him. And I was trying to describe, at the time, something about people I worked with who were depressed. And I was like, I was giving some examples to try to, we were having a conversation. I was trying to explain it to him about my work. He was asking me, what's your work like? And he was new to America, and he was trying to think, become familiar. And so I was describing like some people who were very, very depressed. They felt like it was people had said things to me like that. So I said, oh, the poor people feel like they're nobody and they're like a ghost walking in their own life. And they're like, they're the least important person in the world. And nothing matters, nothing they do matter, nothing, I didn't say that. I'm trying to remember the wording I used. I said something like, they feel like nobody. And he started, and he was listening compassionately, and suddenly he started chuckling and then laughing. And I said, Rinpoche, what's funny? And he said, he said, they don't know how to feel like nobody. And then he said, Bodhisattvas feel like nobody, and they're so happy. But depressed people, he said, then these people feel like nobody, and they're miserable. And he said they have it was like he was saying they have the wrong way of feeling like nobody. They don't know how to feel like nobody. There's a wonderful, so there's a liberating way of feeling like nobody, and there's a depressed way of feeling like nobody was what I took away. And so giving up on this life or stopping doing things, it means I know I'm going to die. None of the stuff of this life, not the all that stuff is like it doesn't matter. It's no big deal, right? What matters, so then what's left? It's like you're free. And that's what I was having an experience one day. I was like that. I was like, oh, it's like I'm already dead. So now all that's left is to love people. I can give up in this life. It's like that, the affairs of this life, the dramas of this life, the fights of this life, those are over. So all that's left is to love and to practice Dharma and to meditate and have peace. Um, and then like if you're paying your bill or something, it's like, that's just like going through the motions. What matters is bodhicitta, right? So you get the feeling. So Shantideva, when he says perform negativities for the sake of this impermanent life, it's like you're attached to this life, so then you would defend it, right? And it's like that mindset, right? Which is, I don't know, I mean, it's like that mindset of, oh, well, I'll defend my house, like, it's very human, isn't it? I'll defend my home, I'll defend my country, I'll defend my body, this is my stand, and I'll stand here. And what this is getting at, Shantideva is saying that's childish, right? And then a mature person knows they may die anyway. So each moment is a moment to love. Each moment is a moment to bodhicitta practice. Each moment is a moment to cultivate wisdom. Anyway, you get the idea of what Shantideva is saying. So, and anything less than that, do you get the idea of regret here? It's like radical now, I hope. It's not I hope you're getting the feeling of what Shantideva is expressing, which is this regret is not some like ritualized, oh, I did negativities in the past and that's just like some words. It's like, I deserve better than that, actually, right? Like I'm the so you and earlier I said it's not self-pity. Actually, I think what Shantideva is getting at is like I deserve better than to be upset about the drama that somebody said something I didn't like, and now like that's a waste of my life. My life is too precious to spend a minute on that. My life is too precious. It's too wonderful. It's too beautiful to spend a minute on being upset and agitated and angry because I'm a being capable of infinite love. Like, so I'll do that. And then if I live that way, I'll live that way. If I die that way, I'll die that way. And anything less than that is sad, actually, isn't it? That's Shantideva's, I think, perspective. And he says, and I'll just do one last verse here. He says, one who is being led today to the spot where his limbs will be mutilated will be petrified with a dry mouth, sunken eyes, and so forth, his entire appearance transfigured. What need to mention the tremendous despair when stricken by the disease of terror, being clasped by the frightful physical forms of the messenger of Yama? Um, who can afford me good protection from this terror? With terrified, bulging eyes agape, I shall search the four directions for refuge. And what he's getting at there again is like, pointing out, like, I don't know if you are, I'm guilty of this sometimes, where like I can be overly on these kind of topics, especially impermanence and death, I can be overly intellectualized, where I can say, oh, well, yes, of course I'll die, and everybody dies, and it's some kind of intellectual idea. I'm confessing a little today, but like that's it's okay to say full of crap. Like, it's like actually, like because then if I'm actually in the doctor's office worrying about something, suddenly my palms get sweaty and my heart's beating fast. So that intellectual idea is nonsense, actually, right? Like, it's an intellectual defense mechanism. It's not real, right? And what he's saying is we're all like this. In other words, if you haven't achieved enlightenment yet, when the Lord of Death, the messengers of death come from you, you're going to be scared. Like that friend of mine who said, oh, if I could just get 6 more months, right? He had a young child who was terrified, dying. Like he didn't want to leave his child. He was terrified of loss. He was there. And he was a very intellectualized person sometimes, but not then, like, my point is nobody is, right? Here is, it's not an intellectualized question. And so, if you, and so what Shantideva is saying here in a way is, if you're trying to do this process that he's describing, you may think, oh, yes, I'll die, and you may all make it like some distant thing and then still stay attached to your self and your life and your stuff and your friends and your enemies. And then he's saying, and so the example he gave is like, he's saying here, actually, I'm gonna go back to the first of those verses where he says, one who's being led to the spot today. He's saying, imagine yourself being dragged by an executioner, right? With the sword, like in a big, what's it called? A hatchet, like in where they're going to chop off your limbs to torture you as you die. He says, in that moment, you're not going to be intellectualized. You're not going to say, oh, it's okay, right? You're going to be terrified, literally terrified. And he's not wishing that on you or something, right? He's saying, imagine that for a moment. And if you're feeling intellectualized about your death, know you're lying to yourself, right? Um, and come back to reality, which is I'm grasping at stuff and I need to change that, right? Uh, I'm grasping at some things and averse to others and caught up in the drama I'm going to call it the drama of this life, right? Um, and he's saying, if you think you're not caught up in that, it's an intellectual defense. It's that you're being phony to yourself. Be honest with yourself, right? If you're still scared of death, good. Then remember death in order to change. And last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop. Actually, another teacher of mine, the one who I've mentioned him many times, Reaper Rinpoche, he was the one who like was tortured for many years by the Chinese and uh, practiced bodhicitta the whole time. But he once said something, which is he said, and I always remember this. He said, until you realize bodhicitta, the awareness of death is what actually is the engine for your dharma, your spiritual practice. Your spiritual life is the actual engine for it is an awareness of impermanence. Then he says, once you realize bodhicitta, then that becomes like the engine of your spiritual life. And he said, so until you actually actualize bodhicitta, you have to be aware of it, focus on impermanence as a way of actually making your spiritual life alive. And then once you realize bodhicitta, you don't, your spiritual life will be alive all the time through that. So anyway, I'm going to stop there. Next time we'll finish chapter 2. And then I'll ask you, I'll just mention something. Next time when we'll finish chapter 2, which is all, the rest is still confession. And then I'll ask you all if you have verses that resonate for you. Remember, I said I'll do it at the end of each chapter. So next class, I'll finish chapter 2, and then I'll ask y'all if anybody wants to share like particular verses that resonate for them in this chapter. But anyway, we should do the verse of dedication. The supreme jewel bodhicitta, where it has not arisen, may it arise and grow. Where it has arisen, may it not decrease, but increase more and more. In this snowy mountain paradise, you the source of good and happiness, all-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. I dedicate all these merits, which are dependently arising, merely labeled till they empty from their own sides, that the I, who is dependently arising, merely labeled till they empty from its own side, may achieve Buddha's enlightenment, which is dependently arising, merely labeled till they empty from its own side, to lead all sentient beings who are dependently arising, merely labeled till they empty from their own side, to the state of enlightenment as quickly as possible. And thanks, everybody.